Sophie Dawes, born around the year 1790 to 1792 in St. Helens, could hardly have imagined that her path would lead her to the grand salons of high society and the most absurd social myths. Her modest origins did not prevent her from possessing both luck and cunning. As a result, the young woman, whom many dismissed as nothing more than an unfortunate provincial girl, transformed into the favorite of Louis Henry, Duke of Bourbon, Louis VI de Bourbon-Condé. The prince and his courtiers were bewildered, clutching their lace handkerchiefs in astonishment as the duke insisted on presenting Sophie as his adopted daughter, despite remaining a married man. According to various accounts, Sophie had a magnetic charm even in her youth. Was she an English maid? A tavern worker? Her origins became the subject of speculation and legend. Regardless, fate granted her a chance. She found her way to France, where she mingled with the upper circles and met influential figures. Some claimed that the Duke of Bourbon noticed her in a ballroom or in the home of a close courtly lady. What remains undisputed is that Louis Henry was married, yet had a clear preference for lively and unrefined women. Sophie fit this description perfectly. Their secret relationship scandalized the aristocracy, as the Duke was forced to grant her an official status of sorts. He declared Sophie his daughter by upbringing, even though she resided in the palace and was always available for his friendly conversations. The court preferred not to ask unnecessary questions, though everyone knew the truth. The Duchess, the lawful wife of Louis Henry, refused to recognize some Englishwoman as her husband's almost daughter. However, an open scandal would have damaged the family's reputation, so the matter was officially ignored. Still, courtiers gossiped that the Duke lavished extravagant gowns and jewelry upon Sophie, discussed his future plans with her, and even considered how to secure her a solid position in society. Sophie, according to many, was not merely a passive recipient of his gifts. She carefully wove her own web of social connections. At some point, Louis Henry decided it was time to give Sophie an official title. It was said that he arranged her marriage to Baron Adrien Victor de Feuchères in order to formally introduce her to high society. Some believed that the Baron was unaware of the Duke's intimate relationship with his so-called adopted daughter. Thus, the favorite became a respectable madame by marriage, while the Duke continued to keep her close. The wedding ceremony was modest, attended by only a few notable witnesses to prevent excessive rumors. Of course, the court still whispered about the affair. He raises a girl, yet spends enormous sums on her. Nothing new in palace chronicles. Meanwhile, the ducal family teetered on the edge of crisis. Louis Henry had strained relationships with both his lawful wife and his relatives. Now a baroness by marriage, Sophie actively managed the estates granted to her. Some believed she even controlled the Duke's financial affairs. She was often the first to intervene in family matters, and sometimes had access to documents concerning inheritance. Certain members of the Condé lineage viewed her as a dangerous Englishwoman, wielding too much influence over the aging Duke. The infatuated Baron, upon discovering the truth about the nature of the relationship between Louis Henry and Sophie, filed for divorce in March of 1824. Sophie was banned from appearing at the royal court and at the Palais Royal, where she had once held considerable influence. Some claimed she was not too upset by this, but in reality, tending to a 70-year-old Louis Henry was hardly enjoyable for her either. She tried to restore her reputation, but it was in vain. Using her influence over the aging Prince Condé, Sophie helped persuade him to bequeath the majority of his fortune to his godson, the young Duke of Aumale. Having lost his only son, the Duke of Enghien, who was executed by order of Napoleon in the year 1804, Condé was left without an heir, dooming his lineage to extinction. The will was signed in July of the year 1829, and by January of the year 1830, Sophie had returned to court, while her nephew was granted the title of Baron. Another patron of Sophie was Talleyrand, who facilitated the advancement of her relatives. In return, she helped maintain Condé's favor toward the minister, despite his involvement in the execution of the prince's son. By the end of Louis Henry's life, the story took a dark turn. Rumors spread that the Duke had not died of natural causes. Some claimed he was found hanged. Others said he had been strangled. The details varied. Documents revealed that his will had been hotly contested. As in his old age, Prince Condé had bequeathed substantial estates and financial sums to Sophie. Sophie was suspected of orchestrating his fortune for herself, yet she insisted that she was merely a devoted friend and that all gifts were made by the Duke out of genuine affection. The new King of France, Louis-Philippe I, who had once held the title of Duke of Orléans and was closely acquainted with Sophie, had no interest in investigating the suspicious death of Louis Henry. He simply turned a blind eye to the possibility of murder. The official investigation failed to prove Sophie's involvement in the Duke's death. Some even whispered that the Duke of Bourbon had died in bed after wedding games with Sophie. Some called Sophie Dawes a cunning fortune hunter, while others admired her ability to rise from obscurity to the heart of aristocratic intrigue. Those close to the court whispered that Louis Henry, on his deathbed, still acknowledged Sophie as his beloved and cursed anyone who dared to insult her. One thing remained certain: Sophie gained fame, remained at court until the Duke's death, and fiercely defended her material rights afterward. Ultimately, she secured a considerable fortune. Many were outraged that a modest girl from St. Helens had become a woman of influence among the French nobility. Nonetheless, she feared retribution from the Condé family heirs for the rest of her life. She died in London in the year 1840 at the age of 50. She left her immense fortune to her niece,